and welcome to today's live event. It's a special event, very special event for me today. So today we're going to be talking about content strategies unleashed with the one and only Dan Plume from Plume Content Limited. Welcome to the show, Dan.
Hello, thanks for having me. You sound even more Geordie now than any time we've spoken before. Is this your presenting voice?
Yeah. I mean, technically it's Mackham.
Okay.
But yeah, I'll take Geordie. I'll take Geordie to the unbeknown. This is what happens when I stand up. You see, I become more Paul, which I'm not sure whether that's a good thing or not. But that's where we're at. So I was going to go with it. Yeah, that's it. That is very much my personal brand. So I mentioned that this is for me, this is personally quite a big live stream, is because this is the first time I've done a live stream with an official partner. So behind the scenes, Dan and I have been working very hard on creating some joint promotional packages and getting together in terms of how we can support each other. And the tall and short of it being is, as many of my audience will already know, Javelin is all about taking video from clients, maximizing it with repurposing, turning it into lots and lots of digital assets and giving them that back fast. Where I'm not so strong, and an area I don't ever really intend to get into myself, is creating the strategy that leads to that happening. And so we formed a formal partnership between Dan and I, where Dan does all the intelligent thinking and he lays the tracks down for me to follow, and I drive the train over the top of it.
Too kind. Too kind. No, I think it made sense from, and I know you've probably got more to dive into, but just sort of capitalize on that and just sort of say thank you. I try and do some of the thinking. I think it's a good chance for, well, it's a good thing for me because a lot of the conversations that I'm having, video is at the forefront, whether that's interview style podcasts like this, like live shows or whatever, but using video and amplifying video and getting that far and wide is so critically important. So a chance to work with you and turn it around like at the drop of a hat is magic for me, really.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, we can save the back patting for later, I guess. The audience are going to want to know what it is that we're actually going to show them. So I'll move on. But good to be working with you guys. And I think what we wanted to cover today was, I talk a lot about how to make content efficiently and how to make it easily and how you can do it yourself, the tools that people use. But actually, there's a step before all that, which is where you come into things, Dan, which is, how do you create a content strategy? How can you approach that from a full funnel context? How can you make your content work harder? How can you make it last longer? And what are some of the effective ways to distribute that content? So we're going to cover all of those over the course of the next 25-30 minutes. But the first thing I'm going to shout out before we get involved in any of that is, people, this is a live event. I can see it when you comment. Wherever you can see us, I should be able to see you comment. Feel free to pipe up, ask your questions, give me a shout. Anything that's burning your brain that you want to ask Dan or myself, we'll do our best to answer it live. And if not, we'll cry about it later and send you an email. And if you are watching this back, if you are watching this back and you're not managing to make it live, don't worry about it. We all have work commitments during the day. Feel free to watch it. Drop us a note in the comments. And Dan and I will definitely respond. We're both really responsive people in terms of LinkedIn and Facebook and YouTube and things.
Too much.
So, just to bring that back a little bit, then, Dan. So we talk about a full funnel approach with regards to content. What's your strategy behind all of that? What's your thinking there?
That's a good question. So, when it comes to sort of content strategy and adopting a full funnel approach, a lot of the clients I work with are aware that they need to be producing content. They get hung up on types, tactics, and they don't then think about the story from an end-to-end perspective. So a really good example, I'm working with a client at the moment, and we are doing a video plus content package, working with their subject matter experts to amplify them on their channels, build their own personal brands, but also kind of like tie that back into service offerings, into all that kind of content perspective, and Sorry, LinkedIn events not been great experience so far. Oh, okay. Thanks, Adam. That's okay. I need to hide that comment, because that's really knocked me off my stride. So, talking about working with their subject matter expert to amplify their own personal message, but tying that back into service offering and funneling people down into, or at least offering them that opportunity to funnel them down into service offerings, engagement, and deeper engagement. So it's kind of tying that initial pain point, audience pain point, into thoughtful content that takes them down through that funnel. Sorry, I'm garbling a little bit. So that thought leadership stuff at the top, into comparisons, into middle of funnel, into engagement levels, and then further down into actually like encouraging people to engage and connect and contact. And I think people get hung up on a topic, a theme, and a tactical deployment, or like actually producing a piece of content, and stop thinking about that kind of next step. You should always be thinking about a next step. No piece of content should exist in isolation. And like, think, if you're coming in and you've got a customer, for example, like, what's the piece of content that could lead into the customer story? What's the piece that could lead into the piece before that, and then subsequently what's after that? Like, what did the customer do that could be of interest to that person to learn more about, or dive deeper into? And that's some of just kind of walking through that with clients and expanding on that. We have a content pipeline, and we're producing content into mapping it into a sort of funnel approach, or at least kind of showing how those things feed into one another and can funnel people through. Like, it's quite eye-opening for people, which is quite eye-opening for me, considering how long I've been doing this, that there are still clients and people out there that are perhaps still kind of discovering that kind of approach to delivering content, or creating content that should ultimately drive people through to generate ROI on their investment.
Yeah, I think if you've got, from a client's perspective, it's really easy to just focus on the sales part of things. That's the bit that everybody's interested in, right? That's the bit that drives the return, is how we're going to get more sales. And I think it's really hard for a lot of people to comprehend that there's a whole journey that needs to be gone on by the customer to get to that point, because it's your product, it's your service. Of course people want it, but the truth of the matter is there's probably hundreds of people out there that have a similar offering. You need to differentiate yourself. You need to catch their attention in the first place. They need to start to understand what you offer. They need to understand your opinions and thoughts on things, and they need to align with you before they'll outreach and come directly to you to say, actually, yes, I want what you have, and I like who you are, and I want to buy your product or service. And I think the other, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, but a lot of the time I speak to people when it's too late. Like, their runway has run out. They've gone through their entire network and they've sold to everyone in their network, and they thought they were doing really well. And then all of a sudden that dries up and they need sales right now, which leads to emergency button pressing, which drives the wrong sort of results, right?
Yeah, random acts of content, or that kind of urgent need. And it usually stems from, like you said, being focused on the bottom end of the funnel, because that's where, that's the most immediate, closest point to the sale, closest to the till, an old boss of mine used to call it. And I think, if you're at that point and you're coming to a creator, I think you're already in trouble, and you're creating stuff with a singular purpose or outcome in mind that might not necessarily be aligned to your broader brand vision, some of the messages, tone of voice, and the way that you actually want to articulate yourself. And I think what tends to then happen is that messaging can become a bit desperate, or can come across that way, or we end up offering limited time offers and price promotions and things that don't necessarily devalue the brand, but they kind of catch you into that loop where people don't want to pay you full price for your service, and then you're sort of stuck down in that lower tier of things that ultimately, like you say, they're not going to get you results longer term, and you will end up back there again in the not too distant future, because you just need that slightly longer term view and to think holistically about what you're doing, particularly if you're putting the investment into video. It's like, if you're gonna speak to somebody, if you're gonna have these kind of conversations with your subject matter experts or whatever, it's like, okay, we need to get life out of it. We need to think that people who are just experiencing it are not necessarily going to be demanding that, like, or going to go through like, yeah, I must buy now. Like, you need to kind of think through that. There was a good podcast I listened to recently, the Uncensored CMO, with whose name has now going to completely escape me, but she's the CMO of PwC, and she wrote the book on kind of B2B marketing during lockdown, and she kind of calls, there's the sort of 5 distinct audience groups who all want different types of content to fulfill very different needs, from like horizon scanners, who are like your execs and C-suites and people who are in charge of steering the business through the next 3, 6, 12 months, who are looking for industry trends and industry information, versus, you know, all the way down to people who are looking for ways to enhance how their operation works right now, considering vendors, considering suppliers and applications, and then through to people who are like implementing them. And they're all very different, and they're all after very different types of content, which is another kind of lens to put on that full funnel, because I think buying processes are not linear anymore. But if you consider the people involved in that sale, it hopefully should help you come up with ideas of things that you need, and to consider your content production in a slightly more considered way, in a strategic way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's worth also bearing in mind that different people consume content in different formats. Whether that's because you're neurodiverse, whether it's a preference, whether it's time constraints. You know, we've seen this with Audible versus ebooks. I often consume Audible books. I love a hand, like, you know, a book in my hand. I love the feel of a book, and I try to own everything. I've got loads of books here on the side, but quite often I'm out walking, listening to Stephen Bartlett at 1.5 speed, whilst I'm walking, you know, my son, trying to get him to sleep while he's screaming at me. So we do what we have to do. But then there's also a case of, you know what, I talk a lot about video content. You know, not everybody wants to read what you've written. Sometimes that's a preference, because, you know, actually it's just easier for me to listen to something and casually glance up at whoever's voicing that. But then actually sometimes it's just a case of, like, if I see a big chunk of text, I'm ADHD, I can't, you know, if I see a big block of text, I just look at it and go, yeah, I'm not reading that. Even if it's important. Like, it could be in my insurance documents, and I'll just look at it and go, yeah, somebody else can read that. I ain't reading it. What's the important bits? That's all I need to know. So I think it's very important to consider, like, all the various types of audience that you might have, and make sure that you're regularly ticking boxes for everyone, as much as possible. It's not, there's limits to the hours in the working day, and let's be honest, your business isn't creating content. Your business is whatever you set it out to be, and content is an engine that helps guide your market and efforts and get you there. I've certainly seen a lot of response to things like visualizers and short reels from the neurodiverse community, where they're just like, thank you for breaking that down, because I ain't watching that 30-minute podcast. Much like I'll probably do with this episode as well, to be fair.
I'm just disparaging the very thing that we're doing. I mean, it's a very complex thing, because at the surface level, it's like, well, I'm producing things that tell people the problems that I solve and how I do it for people, and then there's the tactical way that you choose to do that, whether that's video, whether that's web, whether that's audio, whether it's whatever, and now there's a whole added layer of complexity that we need to make sure that it's accessible, and all of those things, like you mentioned, the readers and what have you. So there are myriad things to think about, from content operation and like that kind of strategy piece, and like working with the larger clients that I do, like, they have that in-house, and that's a really front and center thing. But for someone who's a smaller business, like, that's a really difficult additional thing to kind of consider. And I don't know whether you have things that you do, processes that you run with your clients to kind of help them through that, navigate that challenge?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'd always encourage my clients who probably are at that stage, exactly as you said, Dan, kind of trying to do everything themselves, wearing a million different hats. My advice is always think strategically about the topics that you want to cover each month. Think about the topics that you want to cover each month, and then create a video, a longer form video of you talking about those topics in passion, in depth, and then turn that content into shorter clips, turn it into blog articles, turn it into in-depth minor articles. You know, you can then use that long form video to kind of drive the rest of your marketing for the rest of the month. And that for me is a really efficient way of, one, getting your thoughts down, downloading your brain and your experience and motivations, but two, just being really concise about sticking with that topic. You can't go too far wrong if you stay within the realms that you previously set out for yourself as the theme for that 30-minute, 15-minute even conversation, and then drive that down into the rest of everything else that you do, and only use that content for that. Well, you probably record it a month in advance, right? So you'd use that for next month's content from day one to the end of the month. I'm talking about this particular aspect of our business. And I think if you do that way, then you can apply some of the principles you've talked about, Dan, about how do we start with creating some topics that will give us brand consideration, which will get us noticed. How do we, get people out of the feed and go, oh, right, I've never heard of these guys, but actually this is really good. To, okay, these are my pain points. How do you solve them at the other end of that? At the other end of that spectrum, before they're about ready to buy. So that for me is that. But like, I guess you've also got some thoughts on how you can make your content work harder and stick around for longer, right? So like, it's not always about writing new content all the time, is it?
No, and there's interesting research done by System One. I posted this on my LinkedIn a few days ago, just around content longevity. They did a study on adverts, and everybody sees adverts and everybody is aware of adverts and has a fairly strong opinion on them. And they tested whether ads wear out over time. Like, the more you see them, the more, the less effective they become, essentially. And ultimately, they found no evidence of that. If the work is good, like, it actually wears in, people become more accustomed to it. They see it more, and it's like that kind of instant kind of like hit of, oh yeah, I remember this. And that's ultimately like the purpose of marketing, is that salience, that like stealing that mind share when people are at that point of purchase, when they're considering a service. Like, you want to be in that. I think it was I think it's Giles from Gasp Agency talks about, if you're not in the room already, like, it's really, really hard to kind of come through and break into that room. So you need to be in somebody's like mind already. So if you've done a body of work and you've produced a load of content and you're pleased with it and you're happy with it and you know that it's on point, it's on message, give it the shelf life that it deserves. I think just on like LinkedIn stats, I think it's between 8 to 10% of your audience will see a single post, unless of course you're putting paid spend behind it. But at least a top of like 10% will see a post, unless obviously it does go viral. But just as a kind of indication there, like, that gives you sort of an opportunity to kind of post it 10 times, just to even get close towards kind of like saturation of your own followers and your own audience. So that just should give you an example of just how long a shelf life this stuff has. But then when you put that lens of actually things kind of wear in over time, and people start to recognize and respond to the message that you're putting out into the market, like, that should give you the confidence to put things out more regularly, slice it and dice it into as many different ways, formats that you can, and continue to share. I think we've all been guilty. I mean, I even now as I'm talking, I know that I had posts that I did last year that did well, and I really should have shared them more than once, or like that point of view more than once, and I haven't. So I need to follow my own advice. But there is,
I've actually got a really good example there, Dan. Is like, I used to be in charge of my old CEO's LinkedIn feed for him, right? And well, I was managing 4 accounts at the time for the business, right? So trying to be as efficient as I can with content. And he used to like posting up some humor. So we did a little bit like white label comedy and that sort of thing. He used to write some of his own, and like he was, to be fair, he was actually quite funny. He was a former stand-up comedian himself.
That's helpful.
And he wrote a particular post. I'm not funny in the slightest, so I don't try. I just copy other people and repost things. But he posted something up, and it was. Do you remember like when we were kids, and they're definitely still there because I've seen them. Those makeshift school outdoors environments, like the porta cabins, right? Every school had one somewhere, and like it did a post around that, and it got loads of traction. Everybody thought it was hilarious. You know, I thought this was where my actual school was in the 80s or something like that. And I thought that did really well the first time. I'm gonna post it again 6 months later. So I posted it again, and it got better traction than it got the first time. And then I thought I'm gonna see how far I can take this before people notice. And I posted it 6 times in 18 months. And it got better results 5 times out of those 6 every time I posted it. And the irony being, some of the same people were commenting on the 6th occasion that commented on the 2nd and 3rd occasion. So even though they'd seen it and they'd seen that same content before, they were still reacting to it from the same person and still getting results from it. So it's entirely possible to do. Dave Plunkett, who's a good friend of mine, always says the only person who gets bored of your content is you.
Exactly that. And I think, because you're surrounded by it and you're consumed by it when you're creating it, and I think it just takes up so much of your mental capacity. It just kind of like completely dominates your thinking, and it's like, wow, I'm glad that that's over. Like I've spent the last 2 weeks like producing this, and like, you know, for you, like editing video, like going over this, agonizing over the same quote that you've said. It's like, oh, maybe I can remove that little pause there, like over and over and over and over and over. Nobody else has been through that, but you can't put yourself in somebody else's shoes at all. It's impossible to kind of create this sort of blank canvas. But the research from System One's really interesting, and I will endeavor to like dig out the link to it, because I just think it's really powerful indicator that you can get so much life out of the work that you're doing, and provided that you stick to your core strategy and your audience pain points, and you've done that work to like really nail those down, just keep hammering it out there. You want to become basically you want to get to the point where when somebody says something, the immediate reaction is, oh, you need to speak to them, like, because that is all they go on about. And you want it to get to that point where it's almost like you're almost an irritant, like, but you're not. But like that's sort of how you would feel in your mind. Just it has to get to that level. So I think just factor that into all of the stuff that you're doing, and add it numerous times over probably a year period, and just see how it performs over time.
I'd agree, and just keep going back to the stuff that did well and just retest it, see whether it's still relevant or not. The other thing that I would also suggest is try to be as polarizing as you dare to be, because indifference is what kills most businesses, and everybody's scared to be anything other than vanilla. I know I spent 15 years in corporate world. I wasn't even allowed to post on LinkedIn without running it by our head of admins, which stopped me from posting at all because I was scared to death of her. If you're watching this, yes, I was scared to death of you. I'm not anymore. But you know, that's where it is for most people. You're in that corporate life, you daren't say anything that's not vanilla, because you've got the brand above you and you're worried of doing damage to that and risking your job. But actually, as an individual and as a small business owner, you've got the right to choose your audience and choose who your clients are going to be. And actually, you know, I mentioned Stephen Bartlett's book earlier on. There's a great bit in there about changing people's beliefs. And you need people to believe that you're an expert, and the way that you go about helping them believe that is by demonstrating to them with credible evidence that you're an expert in their field, that they resonate with 90% of the things that you say. So you might just be telling them things they already know, but because you're aligning with the 90% of things that they agree with, actually when you tell them that, yes, we are the choice for you, people in your position, we're the service that's of choice for you because of these things, then they're going to start to see you as a credible expert. And that's when the buy happens. So I think that's really important, and I've been guilty of that in the past. I'm trying to do a little bit more polarizing stuff in 2024, but it's not easy. It's hard, right?
It is difficult. It has to align to, again, like the brand, your brand, the essence of your brand, like your position and vision that you have, and then it comes down to what you feel comfortable and confident doing. Like just being polarizing for polarizing's sake, I think is really difficult. I can't remember who said it to me. It's like if you're not turning some people away, you're not attracting people to you either, which I think is a really good way of sort of thinking of it, because we are strongly opinionated, and there is a tribe or an audience out there for you, and you just have to be confident and comfortable, and like you say, not I mean, my stuff is mostly pretty vanilla, to be honest. I'm still figuring out my tone of voice, but I'll get there. It's always a work in progress. I think you have to keep testing and learning and figuring that out, testing some of the way you construct the points that you make. It's the only way to really kind of figure it out and see what works and what doesn't.
I think it's easier to help other people than it is to work with your own content. Like, it's as simple as that. I think you're too close to the woods to see the trees.
You can't read the label
so sometimes. I've not heard that one before. I'm going to steal that and pinch it. That's great.
Yeah.
But exactly that, right? Like Stephen King. You don't get Stephen King to write his own dust jacket, because you can't. He's written 500-600 pages of a novel. He can't possibly distill that into 3 paragraphs. You hire someone else to come in and read the book and then say, this is 3 paragraphs that define this book. And so that's why I always recommend people, budget willing and foresight willing to work with somebody external to go, what is our brand? What is our messaging? What is our strategy? And what's the best content that we can create? That's if you're going to do everything, that's not a cheap journey to go on as an entrepreneur with not a lot of revenue. So there's shortcuts, there's things you can do to kind of stand yourself up and get there. But the danger in doing that is you forget to go back and start back at square one when you do have the revenue to do it. And it's what will stop you getting to that next level of growth when you get to that point. Is if you want to be that much bigger, you need to at some point come back and put your big boy pants on or your big girl pants on and go, right, actually I want to redesign. Maybe a lot of what you're doing is actually right, who knows, but I think you've got to get that external perspective to get that confidence before you move to the next stage of growth.
I run workshops with new clients that are considering their content output, like from like throwing it, like not throwing everything out, but kind of going, okay, well, what is actually working, what's not working, and I run people through workshops, and there's some brilliant boards that you can find on Miro that will help you, and you can run through yourself with the relevant stakeholders to kind of try and piece together all the bits and pieces that you need to kind of help give yourself an understanding of like who you are for, who you're not for, the pain points that you want to communicate about, and the messaging that you want to use to talk to those. So you can do some of that work yourself, but I think there's tremendous value in working with a strategist and someone who's done a lot of this work before to kind of help you wrangle all those disparate voices and drive the alignment that you need from a ongoing production perspective. So you get everybody pulling in the same direction, particularly if you want to build a kind of culture of content creation in the business, which I think we are rapidly heading towards, if we're not fully at already, in terms of like the creator economy and people creating their own presence and building their own audiences, etc. So I think if you can build a platform and a strategy for people to kind of look at and go, okay, I know how to communicate about this, that, or the other, and who we're trying to reach. Like, I can go out and do this stuff. I think is like like just one of the best things you can do from a business perspective.
Yeah, I'd agree. Obviously, I'm biased, but degree. You know, but again, like I know how hard it is for me. It's like we talk about strategy. I struggle to do my own strategy. I know loads of other people who are in the content strategy space who struggle with creating their own content, because let's be honest, we're all here to achieve the main goal of our own business, and the marketing and social media side of things is sometimes just a distraction for a lot of people. So it can be very much like I'll procrastinate on doing my own videos and my own content. Like I need to do some right now. Like I know I need to do it, and I've been putting it off for the last week. And so I know that there's a valid market for me with my clients, because they will feel the same. It's okay. We all feel that way at times. But you know, taking that long view and understanding that there's real power. I don't have a website. I don't do pay-per-click. I don't do SEO. None of that. And we're doing well. For businesses that have all of the other bits in place, this could be the final key in the puzzle to unlock that final bit of growth for you guys.
Yeah, for sure.
I guess just before I go, because we've kind of been on about 30 minutes there, Dan. So I think we're going to pull this to a close. But I hope it's been useful for the audience at home, sort of small businesses, medium-sized businesses who are looking at this and thinking, where do I even start? And my honest advice would be just reach out and have a chat. Neither Dan nor myself are, we're not pitchy salespeople who just want to drag all the business in. We're here to help people, and I love having conversations with new folks. So if you're out there and you're thinking, we could do with a bit of guidance on where we're going next, you've got our details. I'll pitch them underneath the description on the event. But just reach out, have a chat with us, and we've got the whole package now. So Dan's got the content, we'll do the repurposing on the video, and it's a good alliance. Hopefully, everything all in one box for everyone.
Exactly that.
Fantastic. Any last words, Dan?
No, just make sure if we aren't connected already, like reach out to me on LinkedIn, and like Paul says, if you have any questions about where to start, how to kind of get things moving, or you want to talk about like having a review of like what you're doing, or a bit of an audit and bit of a conversation about it, drop me a line and we'll have a chat.
Perfect. Thanks. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. And if you're watching us back recorded, reach out and let us know your questions. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Cheers, guys. Bye.